Welcome to Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. The place where history's most unsettling truths emerge from the shadows, where declassified files whisper secrets long buried, and where the boundary between science, espionage, and the unexplained dissolves into something far more complex. If you've ever sensed that the official story is just the surface, and that beneath it lies a labyrinth of covert experiments, institutional obsession, and human potential pushed to its limits, then you're in the right place. Today we embark on a deep, exhaustive, and meticulously researched journey into one of the most enigmatic chapters of American intelligence history, Project Stargate. In the 1970s, as the Cold War reached its most volatile peak, the United States wasn't only competing with the Soviet Union in missile silos, satellite networks, and nuclear stockpiles. Behind closed doors, in secure laboratories and military compounds, another race was unfolding, one that defied conventional logic, challenged the very foundations of scientific materialism, and involved millions of taxpayer dollars spent on a single audacious premise: that the human mind could transcend space and time to gather intelligence. This was not the plot of a Hollywood thriller. This was real. This was Project Stargate, a classified U.S. government program that sought to develop psychic spies capable of remote viewing, the alleged ability to perceive distant locations, objects, or events using extrasensory perception, ESP. For over 2 decades, from the early 1970s until its official termination in 1995, Project Stargate operated under layers of secrecy, shifting between the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, the U.S. Army, and even elements of the National Security Agency, NSA. It trained military personnel and civilian psychics to see enemy installations, track missing persons, locate hidden weapons, and even predict geopolitical events, all without leaving a secure room at Fort Meade, Maryland. Some of their reports were dismissed as fantasy. Others were so accurate they left intelligence analysts stunned. But why did the U.S. government invest so heavily in what many considered pseudoscience? Was there any real operational value? And perhaps most crucially, what do the declassified documents truly reveal about the program's successes, failures, and ultimate fate? Over the next 6,000+ words, we will reconstruct the full, unfiltered history of Project Stargate, not through sensationalism, but through primary sources, declassified government records, scientific evaluations, first-hand testimonies, geopolitical context, and critical analysis. We'll trace its origins from Cold War paranoia and Soviet rumors to its birth at Stanford Research Institute. We'll meet the key figures, scientists, soldiers, skeptics, and believers, who shaped its trajectory. We'll dissect its most famous and infamous remote viewing sessions, examine the rigorous protocols developed to standardize psychic perception, and explore the internal battles that ultimately led to its demise. We'll also confront the lingering questions: did remote viewing work? Could it ever be reliable? And is it possible that similar research continues today, under even deeper secrecy? This is not just a story about telepaths and mind reading. It's a story about fear, institutional inertia, the limits of human knowledge, and the desperate measures nations take when they believe their survival is at stake. So fasten your seatbelt. We're going deep into the archives, and into the mind. To understand Project Stargate, we must first understand the world that gave birth to it. The early 1970s were a period of profound crisis for the United States. The Vietnam War had ended not in victory, but in chaotic retreat. Public trust in government had collapsed after Watergate. The 1973 oil embargo triggered economic panic. And globally, the Soviet Union appeared to be gaining strategic advantage, not just militarily, but in domains previously considered fringe or fantastical. Intelligence reports, fragmentary, often unverified, but deeply alarming, began circulating in Washington that the USSR had launched a massive state-funded program in parapsychology. Soviet scientists, it was claimed, were training operatives in telepathy, psychokinesis, and bioenergetic weapons capable of influencing minds or disrupting electronic systems from afar. Whether these reports were exaggerated, misinterpreted, or entirely fabricated mattered less than the perception. If the Soviets were exploring the psychic frontier, the U.S. could not afford to be left behind. In the zero-sum logic of Cold War deterrence, even the possibility of a psychic arms race demanded a response. This mindset, paranoid, reactive, yet strangely open to unconventional ideas, created the perfect incubator for Project Stargate. But the seed was not planted in Langley or the Pentagon. It sprouted in Menlo Park, California, at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, a non-profit research center with deep ties to defense contractors and intelligence agencies. There, two physicists, Harold E. Puthoff and Russell Targ, were conducting experiments that would soon attract the attention of the CIA. Puthoff, a former NSA consultant with a PhD in electrical engineering, had become fascinated by consciousness studies after encountering the work of Swiss physicist Carl Jung and quantum theorist David Bohm. Targ, a laser physicist who had worked on classified Air Force projects, shared Puthoff's belief that phenomena like telepathy and clairvoyance deserved rigorous scientific investigation. Both were careful to distance themselves from New Age mysticism. They framed their work in the language of information theory and quantum non-locality, the idea that particles can be instantaneously connected across vast distances, a concept validated by Bell's theorem in the 1960s. In 1972, they began a series of controlled experiments in what they called remote viewing. A subject, often an artist, meditator, or self-described psychic, would be placed in a shielded room, given a random set of geographic coordinates, e.g. 48 degrees 51 minutes north, 2 degrees 21 minutes east, and asked to describe in writing or sketch what they perceived at that location. The target could be a military base, a natural landmark, or even a secret facility. Crucially, neither the viewer nor the experimenter knew the target in advance, a protocol designed to eliminate sensory leakage or unconscious cueing. The results were startling. In one early test, artist Ingo Swann, a New York-based painter with no scientific background but a lifelong interest in altered states of consciousness, was given coordinates pointing to a classified Soviet radar installation in Siberia. He described a large circular array of dishes, metallic structures, and snow-covered ground, details later confirmed by satellite imagery. In another session, Swann was asked to view the planet Jupiter before NASA's Voyager probe arrived. He spoke of multiple rings, gaps, and fine particulate matter, observations that matched Voyager's findings months later. Skeptics dismissed these as lucky guesses or retrofitted interpretations, but to Puthoff and Targ, the consistency across multiple trials suggested something real was happening. Encouraged, they submitted a proposal to the CIA in 1972. To their surprise, the agency allocated $50,000 for a pilot study. The CIA's interest wasn't born of belief, but of risk calculus. If there was even a 1% chance that remote viewing could yield actionable intelligence, it was worth exploring. After all, traditional espionage was costly, dangerous, and often ineffective against hardened Soviet targets. A method that required only a human mind and a set of coordinates, if it worked, would be revolutionary. By 1973, the program had grown. The CIA formally designated it Project Stargate, short for Scan by Coordinate, and later Grill Flame, before it evolved into Project Stargate in the 1980s. Funding increased. More viewers were recruited, and the targets became more operationally relevant: nuclear facilities, submarine pens, terrorist hideouts. But the real turning point came in 1975, when the CIA transferred the program to the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. The DIA saw greater military utility in psychic espionage, especially for battlefield reconnaissance and hostage recovery. The program was relocated to Fort Meade, Maryland, a heavily secured Army base just outside Washington, D.C., home to the National Security Agency and a hub of signals intelligence. There, a small unit of military personnel, many with backgrounds in intelligence, special forces, or psychological operations, were trained as remote viewers. Among them was Sergeant Joseph McMoneagle, a decorated Army veteran with 20 years of service and a top-secret/sensitive compartmented information, TS/SCI clearance. McMoneagle would become the program's most prolific and credible operative. Unlike many self-proclaimed psychics, he was disciplined, analytical, and deeply skeptical of his own abilities, at least at first. He described his early sessions as frustrating and vague, but with training, his accuracy improved dramatically. McMoneagle's sessions read like scenes from a Cold War thriller. In 1979, U.S. intelligence lost track of the Soviet Navy's new Kiev-class aircraft cruiser after it entered a restricted shipyard in Nikolaev, Ukraine. Satellite coverage was limited. Human intelligence was non-existent. McMoneagle was given only the coordinates. In his session, he described a dry dock, workers in blue coveralls, a large crane with a red arm, and a ship with a distinctive angled deck. Days later, U.S. reconnaissance photos confirmed every detail. The Navy was stunned. For the first time, remote viewing had provided real-time intelligence that traditional methods could not. In another mission, during the height of the Iran hostage crisis in 1980, McMoneagle was tasked with locating the 52 American hostages held in Tehran. He described a stone building near water, a courtyard with trees, and guards wearing green uniforms. While the information wasn't precise enough to mount a rescue, it aligned with known embassy features and helped analysts narrow their focus. Perhaps his most famous success came in 1983, when he was asked to describe a new Soviet strategic asset under construction. Given only coordinates in Syeverodvinsk, he sketched a massive cylindrical submarine with multiple missile tubes. Analysts were skeptical, until satellite imagery weeks later revealed the Typhoon-class submarine, the largest ever built, capable of carrying 20 nuclear missiles. McMoneagle had never seen a Typhoon. He'd never been to Russia. Yet his description was eerily accurate. But not all missions were triumphs. Remote viewing was inconsistent. Viewers sometimes saw things that didn't exist, conflated imagination with perception, or produced vague impressions that could be interpreted in multiple ways. In one session targeting a suspected Libyan chemical weapons facility, a viewer described large vats and green liquid, but the site turned out to be an olive oil factory. In another, during the Gulf War, remote viewers attempted to locate mobile Scud missile launchers in the Iraqi desert. Their reports were too imprecise to be useful in real-time targeting. This inconsistency became the program's Achilles heel. How do you verify a psychic report? How do you distinguish signal from noise when the signal itself is subjective? And most critically, could remote viewing ever meet the standards of reliability required for military or intelligence operations? To address these issues, Ingo Swann developed a structured methodology called Coordinate Remote Viewing, CRV. CRV broke the viewing process into stages, each focusing on increasingly specific perceptual data. Stage 1 involved basic sensations, motion, temperature, texture. Stage 2 added colors, sounds, and emotions. Stage 3 introduced dimensional sketches, and later stages incorporated analytical overlay, interpreting what the data might mean. The goal was to minimize imagination and maximize raw, unfiltered perception. Viewers were trained to avoid words like I think or maybe. Instead, they reported only what they sensed. CRV became the standard protocol for all military remote viewers. Training lasted months and included meditation, sensory deprivation, and rigorous feedback loops. The idea was that remote viewing wasn't magic. It was a skill, like marksmanship or code breaking, that could be honed with practice. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was indeed investing in parapsychology. Declassified KGB and GRU documents later revealed extensive research into psychotronics, bioinformation fields, and mental influence. Soviet scientists believed that human consciousness emitted subtle energy waves that could be amplified, directed, and weaponized. They trained operatives in telepathic communication, tested whether thoughts could be transmitted across distances, and even explored whether psychic energy could disrupt electronic systems, a concept eerily similar to modern concerns about electromagnetic pulse, EMP weapons. While much of the Soviet work was pseudoscientific, its existence fueled American paranoia. If the USSR believed in psychic warfare, even if it was nonsense, then the US had to respond. This mutual delusion or mirror imaging became a self-reinforcing cycle. Each side's research justified the others. Throughout the 1980s, Project Stargate operated as a niche but persistent asset within US intelligence. It was never part of mainstream collection, but it was used as a supplementary tool, especially in black or no-lead cases where conventional methods failed. During the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing, remote viewers were asked to identify the perpetrators. In the 1986 Challenger disaster, they attempted to locate debris. In the late 1980s, they even tried to view the health status of foreign leaders, including Soviet General Secretary Konstantin Chernenko. But by the early 1990s, the world had changed. The Berlin Wall fell. The Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War ended. With no existential enemy, budgets were slashed, and fringe programs came under scrutiny. Project Stargate, long viewed with skepticism by mainstream intelligence, was particularly vulnerable. In 1995, under pressure from Congress to declassify Cold War-era projects, the CIA ordered an independent scientific review. The task fell to the American Institutes for Research, AIR, a respected nonprofit research organization. Their mandate was clear: evaluate whether remote viewing had any statistical validity or operational utility. The AIR team, led by psychologist Ray Hyman, a noted skeptic of parapsychology, and statistician Jessica Utz, an open-minded analyst, spent months reviewing over 20 years of data, hundreds of sessions, thousands of pages of transcripts, and dozens of experimental protocols. Their conclusions were starkly divided. Utz concluded that the statistical results are not due to chance, and that remote viewing has been demonstrated under controlled conditions. She noted that effect sizes were small but consistent, comparable to other well-accepted phenomena in psychology. Hyman, however, argued that methodological flaws, lack of proper blinding, subjective scoring, and potential for sensory leakage undermined the results. He also pointed out the absence of any plausible mechanism. If remote viewing worked, how did it work? Without a theory, it remained outside the realm of science. Most damningly, the Air report found no evidence that remote viewing had ever provided actionable intelligence that led to a successful military or intelligence outcome. While some reports were intriguing, none had directly prevented a terrorist attack, located a hostage, or altered a strategic decision in a verifiable way. That was the final nail in the coffin. In 1995, after 23 years and an estimated $20 million, Project Stargate was officially terminated. All records were declassified and released to the public through the CIA's FOIA, Freedom of Information Act archive, a rare act of transparency, perhaps intended to dispel conspiracy theories or simply to close a strange chapter of history. But the declassified documents tell a more nuanced story than the official narrative suggests. Yes, there were failures and exaggerations. But there are also transcripts that defy easy explanation. Consider the 1984 session targeting Western China. A viewer, given only coordinates, described a large complex with cooling towers, guarded by soldiers in green uniforms, and a strange humming sound. Months later, U.S. satellites confirmed the existence of a previously unknown nuclear enrichment facility at that exact location. Coincidence? Possibly. But how many such coincidences constitute a pattern? Then there's the matter of training and repeatability. If remote viewing were pure fantasy, why did some individuals, like McMoneagle, consistently outperform others? Why did accuracy improve with practice? And why did the military invest in standardized protocols if the results were random? Moreover, the program's longevity suggests it had powerful advocates within the intelligence community. Why would the DIA, the Army, and even elements of the CIA continue funding it for over 2 decades if it produced nothing of value? Bureaucracies may be inefficient, but they're rarely that wasteful, especially in the high-stakes world of national security. Some former participants believe the program was shut down not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. That it revealed capabilities so unsettling, so disruptive to conventional intelligence paradigms, that it had to be buried. Others speculate that private contractors or black-budget programs absorbed the research after 1995, continuing it under even deeper secrecy. Notably, after the program's termination, several former remote viewers were hired by private intelligence firms, suggesting ongoing interest in the methodology. And then there's the philosophical question: what is consciousness? Modern neuroscience still cannot fully explain subjective experience, memory, or intuition. Quantum physics suggests that at a fundamental level, reality may be non-local, meaning that information isn't bound by space and time. Could remote viewing be a primitive form of accessing this quantum field? We don't know. But dismissing it outright may be as unscientific as believing in it blindly. Project Stargate forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge. It sits at the intersection of science, espionage, psychology, and metaphysics. It challenges our assumptions about what is possible, and what governments are willing to explore when national survival is at stake. Today, many of the original remote viewers are still active. Joseph McMoneagle has written multiple books, consulted for private firms, and continues to advocate for the legitimacy of remote viewing. Ingo Swann passed away in 2013, but his CRV protocols are still taught in workshops around the world. The CIA's declassified files remain online, a treasure trove for researchers, skeptics, and believers alike. So, was Project Stargate a waste of taxpayer money? A Cold War delusion? Or was it a glimpse into a hidden dimension of human potential, one that we're not yet ready to understand? The truth may lie somewhere in between. But one thing is certain: in a world where surveillance is omnipresent and privacy is vanishing, the idea that someone could invade your mind from across the globe is more terrifying than any nuclear weapon. And perhaps that's why they shut it down. Not because it didn't work, but because it might have. As we reflect on this extraordinary chapter of American history, we're left with more questions than answers. Did the U.S. really train psychic spies? Yes. Did they produce useful intelligence? Sometimes. Was it worth $20 million? That depends on whether you believe a single accurate vision is worth more than 1,000 failures. And most importantly, has the research truly ended, or has it simply gone deeper underground? The declassified documents tell part of the story, but the full truth? That may still be locked away in a vault somewhere, waiting for the right mind, or the right viewer, to uncover it. If this deep dive into Project Stargate has opened your eyes to the hidden experiments of the Cold War, if it's made you question what's possible, or what's being hidden, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video to support our mission of uncovering the secrets they don't want revealed. Share it with someone who dares to look beyond the official story. And leave a comment below. Tell us what you think. Was remote viewing real, or just a product of Cold War paranoia? And what secret government program should we investigate next?
Your voice matters.
Because in the shadows, truth doesn't reveal itself. It's uncovered, one viewer at a time.